So YouTube is full of successful attempts people have made to walk the West Highland Way, and I thought I'd sprinkle in some disappointment and failure on top of those stories to tell you how I failed to walk the West Highland Way twice. So think of this as a cautionary tale. Don't let it put you off actually trying things that are completely out of your comfort zone, but realize when you do that, you could fail, most likely, but every so often you can surprise yourself and do something incredible that you would never expect that you could have done. So I was going to do this in one video, tell my story from my first attempt and my second attempt, but when I was kind of going through what I was saying, it's going to be a long video, so we're going to chop this into two. So this is my story of my very first attempt, and then my follow-up video will be the story of my second attempt and where we're going to go from there. So I need you guys to just sit back, put this on while you're cooking or doing some housework, because it's going to be a long one and I don't want to have to really edit it too much. I kind of want to give you the full story hopefully without me waffling too much, because I can tend to waffle. So I've got a glass of wine, go do the same, and let's begin. So if we rewind to last June 2021, now that time for me was a very weird one, and I'm sure I'm not alone. We were coming out of lockdown, nobody had been away, we were all stuck in our houses for the most part, and things were starting to open up and I just needed to get away. Now, my absolute favorite type of content, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's documentaries or TV shows, are things around survival, the outdoors, camping, trekking, tripping, bushcraft, all of that stuff. And I follow so many people who do that really cool adventure stuff out either solo or in small groups, and I love it. And it's something that's always been in the back of my head, and I kind of thought I was more limited in what I could do because of the skills that I lack. And so I always kind of thought, I'd love to do a survival course and get to do this type of stuff. But again, it's a pipe dream. It's something that you want to do, but time passes and a few years later you still haven't done that. But June last year something changed, and I was looking for something, an adventure, a trial. I wanted to put myself through something and prove something to myself, that I could do something on my own, rely on myself, and do something that I was proud of. And I don't know how I came across the West Highland Way, whether it was an article or a blog post, or I'm not sure how I found out about this walk, but as soon as I heard about it, I just wanted to do it. Now, if you don't know what the West Highland Way is, it's a national trail that people walk. Something silly like 50 to 80,000 people walk every year. They come from all around the world, and you start at a little village just north of Glasgow called Mulgai, and you walk or cycle or run 96 miles through the west of the Highlands to Fort William in the north. And the thing that drew me about the walk was initially the landscape. I mean, the Highlands just looked out of this world, beautiful, and from seeing other people's experiences, it just looked like you have to be there to experience it to its full. Also, people tend to make this walk as easy or as difficult as they feel they can handle. So on the one hand, if you've maybe got young kids and you want to do the walk, or you're not that physically fit that you can handle doing it, big mileage days, you can do it over sometimes 9 or 10 days. So just get a few miles in every day, stop off at a B&B, relax, sleep on a proper bed, get your bags transferred from B&B to B&B as you go, take a light day pack, and you're set. Or on the other end of the spectrum, you could decide to do it over 5 days, so you have big mileage days and carry everything you possibly need, bar most of your food, on your back. Now, be me, a novice hiker who's never camped alone, never wild camped, never done any kind of day hiking, never carried anything very heavy on my back whilst doing said hiking. What do you think I chose? You guessed it. I wanted to go all in. I decided 7 days was a good enough kind of time frame to complete it, which means I would average about 15 miles a day, and I wanted to wild camp and have everything I possibly needed on my back. And that idea excited the hell out of me. It just made me think, you know, I'm just gonna have my feet, and my feet are gonna take me there and take me on this awesome adventure. And then I can just plop down, find a really cool little, you know, spot to camp and cook my food and sleep, pack it all up in the morning and head off. That idea to me was, it's all I wanted. So I thought, if I want to do this walk before it gets too cold, the last kind of date I can possibly go is mid-October. And so I planned it. So from June to October was all about planning. I got the gear, I planned my route, you know, where I'd stop, where I'd potentially buy and get, you know, new supplies, planned what I'd take with me clothes-wise, first aid, food, all of that kind of stuff. And I was just so excited. I was so excited. Told you this will be a long one. Whew. So one thing to bear in mind is gear. Now, gear is very expensive, especially like me if you had nothing. I had a 2-man tent and an old sleeping bag that just weren't appropriate, considering everything needed to be on my back in a pack. So I needed pretty much everything. If you want to be have lightweight gear, you pay for it. So I had to kind of juggle my need for reliable gear versus their weight and what I could afford. So I think all told, with all the gear I needed, train tickets, all of that kind of stuff, I probably spent around £800 for the whole thing, which when I initially thought this would be a cheap holiday, not that cheap. But again, I thought if this is something I really enjoy, I'm going to reuse this gear over and over again, and maybe next time I'll only have to kind of, you know, pick up a few new things, but ultimately I'll have the gear. I'll tell you this for free. The most important thing, well, to me, because it's the part that went horribly wrong, are your feet. What you wear on your feet, how you take care of your feet, because ultimately your feet are going to carry you those 96 miles, and if they can't carry you and they give up, you can't do anything. Sorry, my cat's having a go. I have no idea what he wants. What is it? These are the boots I used. Some leather boots I found from Amazon by Northwest Territories. You know, I did a good few miles in them before I left, and they felt absolutely perfect. The only thing that I thought I'd probably get used to, but it was hard to get used to, was how stiff they were. They had no bend, so it felt like my ankle had no mobility. But being leather and quite hard, I thought they would soften up. I would never suggest buying footwear, especially for a multi-day hike, that you've never tried on online. What? I would suggest going to an outdoor store or a shoe store and trying on loads of different types of footwear and making sure that it is dialed in before you leave, because yes, I bit off more than I could chew with this trip, but I really think if my feet were okay, I could have done it. So after all this planning, buying the gear, checking and rechecking what I had, the weights, and repacking and packing my pack, I finally arrived in Mulgai at midday, and I knew I only had about 6 hours of daylight to do 12 miles. Now, I could probably do 12 miles easily, but I had weights. I had 12.5 kgs of weight, which was much more than I should have been carrying considering my body weight. So it's only meant to be 20% of your body weight if you don't want to injure yourself with the amount of weight on your back. So that was fail number one, but whatevs. I didn't know if I could do these 12 miles. I had to, because there's not many places to wild camp on day one. So I had to get to this campsite, which was exactly 12 miles from the start. So I was walking like the devil was chasing me. I was really, really trying to get there, and it was hard. Number one, my boots started, the mobility of my ankles was really starting to bug me. I just couldn't bend my ankle enough, so my ankle started to get really sore. And the pack I had was dragging down on my shoulders. Now again, this was because I was a noob and I didn't know that if you're wearing heavy packs, the weight should be resting on your hips and not your shoulders. I learned that later on in the day when I was like, how the hell do I wear this bag where it doesn't hurt my shoulders? And after I figured out that it needs to sit on your hips, I had a much better time. I also had a very minor toe bang on day one where I kicked a rock and it kind of jarred my toe. My toe banged into the front of my boot, which is very hard treated leather, and it really hurt. It really hurt. And when I finally made it to the campsite, with about 20 minutes of daylight to spare to set up and everything, I noticed that my toenail was a little bit purple. And what really hurt was my ankles though, from, as I say, the lack of mobility. It felt like I couldn't move my foot the way my foot's meant to move. But I felt okay, you know, I knew I could do 12 miles in that amount of time. And the next day I only had 14 miles to do, and I had the whole day. So I was feeling pretty positive as we went into day two. So day two, the plan was to get from Drimmen camping, where I'd camped that night, to a wild camp near Solochi on Loch Lomond. And it did not work out. Day two is when all the problems happened. First problem, I decided to go a little bit off the trail to go into the Drimmen village and to have a nice breakfast before I started. And whilst there, I met up with a French girl that I'd briefly met at the campsite the night before, and we decided to do some walking together. We're both obviously heading in the same direction. The problem was we both took a wrong turn trying to get back on the trail, and we ended up going about 5 miles off the trail and spent all morning trying to get back on the trail. Instead of kind of just turning around, based on our maps and where we saw we were, it kept seeming like we'd hit the trail soon, and we ended up getting bogged in a field. The farmer had to let us out because the fence was too high to climb. It was a mess. So we were back in Drimmen village at about 12:30. So I thought, I'm in the exact same position as I was yesterday. I'm only just starting my walk at 12:30 in the afternoon. Anyway, we had a hot chocolate, we had something to eat, and we started afresh. And it was going well. I soon realized that she was much fitter than me, and she was much more used to walking and climbing Conic Hill, which doesn't seem that high. It felt that high. It really did. Going uphill with my boots and my weird ankle mobility, and I struggled, and I kept kind of saying to her, if you need to go, just go. So we didn't quite make it to the top of Conic Hill. I think we were both kind of just knackered. We were near the top, and we already saw some amazing views. We realized time was ticking, so we kind of thought, let's just start going down. Coming down Conic Hill, I experienced the worst pain. It's hard to say if it's the worst pain I've ever felt, but it was a new kind of pain that blew my mind. So most of West Highland Way is very rocky trails, and it can be quite harsh underfoot. And obviously coming down Conic Hill, it's very rocky. So again, you know, just watch how you go. I unfortunately banged both of my toes at pretty much the same time coming down, and that pain was unreal. Unreal. Now, what I should have done, again, noob, but I didn't, was trim my toenails before I walked. And the reason I didn't do that was because I'd been having trouble with a little bit of an ingrown nail, and I didn't want it to hurt when I walked, so I thought I'm just gonna leave my toenails, and that was a mistake. Because basically what happens is, because your nail is coming out slightly more than, you know, the fleshy part of your toe, when I bang my toe, it pushes the nail backwards. And that is exactly what happened on both of my big toes. And the pain was indescribable. And at that point, I told this girl I was with, because she needed to make some ground. She had booked a hostel and I could wild camp anywhere, and she needed to get there. So I said, listen, please go. I've done some work to my toes here. I need to just rest, you know? So I did, and I was in pain, and the rest of the walk down there, because I felt like any wrong move, my toe would bang that end of my boot again, and I couldn't imagine a repeat of that pain. So I was kind of coming down on the side, and it took me a long time to get down. And it kept coming down and down and down until a little town called Balmaha. And then I kind of knew I was on the lock, and I just had about 8 miles to go until I reached where I planned to camp that night. But in all the videos and all the articles I read, nobody quite told me how rocky and ridiculous the terrain is going next to Loch Lomond. Now, Loch Lomond is a massively long loch. It goes for 27 miles, and the trail for the most part is very narrow, very rocky, and you've constantly got to watch where your feet are being placed. Now, me with a quite painful foot injury, I was so cautious with my feet. Every step needed to be planned so I didn't do any further damage to my toes. I was scared to take my boots off to see the damage, because my toes were just like throbbing with all sorts of pain. So I didn't make it anywhere near to my campsite that night at all. I found a little glade. It was quite nice. It was I didn't need a permit because it's October. Ordinarily you'd need a permit to camp along the banks of Loch Lomond wild, and I just found a nice little spot. I feel wiped out today. Yesterday was so difficult. With the wrong turn, I ended up pushing harder than I did on my first day, and everything is swollen. My Achilles heels, my toes, even my thumb, because of the extra pressure I was using on the walking sticks to help me along. I found this little campsite last night out of pure desperation, because it was getting late, it was getting dark. I wanted to set up before it was fully dark. So I'm ready to go, but getting my stuff packed today took a lot out of me. I'm feeling a little bit shaky. I've had a coffee and a Trek bar. Hopefully I'm fueled enough for what's to come today. I think we've got about an 18-mile day if I want to make it to Beinglass campsite. Do you know what? I'll end up where I end up. I'm not pushing myself today, not if I don't have to. I just wanted to push myself as far as I could yesterday, so today wasn't as bad as it could have been. Day 3 was hard. Day 3, I knew I had so much work to do. I knew I had to make up the time that I'd missed the day before. I was even in more pain, and I kind of wanted to help my toes out by protecting them as much as I could. So I made a really stupid call. There's these blister plasters called Compeed, and they're quite thick rubbery plasters that you're meant to put over your blisters. They stick super tight. You can wet your feet. It'll stay stuck. I thought to protect my toes, luckily I only did it on my worst of my big toes, my left toe, is I put a Compeed plaster over my toe. And when it came to the end of day 3, and I wanted to take that plaster off, because the state of my toenail underneath didn't look great, and I didn't think the plaster was doing it any favors, I kind of lifted it up and I saw my whole big toenail move. And it was not only painful, but the worst thing to see is your toenail. Your toenail should be stuck to your skin and not move under any circumstances. So there I was left with half a plaster on, and I needed to get it off. I thought if I catch this by mistake and it rips my toenail off, I'm gonna know all about it and it's gonna be horrible. What do? So I Googled it, I found a forum post, and I'll always be grateful to this woman who said that the easiest way to get, you know, a comfy plaster off is not to peel it off, but to pull it off from both ends, and it kind of stretches and unsticks. And that's what I did, and it came off, and my toe was in a sorry state. Spoiler alert, I did not make it to the campsite I planned for day 3. I didn't make it to that campsite until day 5. And by that point, I was just under halfway, and I thought, I can't do the extra 50 miles in 2 days to get to Fort William. I think by day 4, I knew I wasn't gonna make it, but I was determined to put my all into it. And then when I kept falling back, Loch Lomond was a lot trickier than I'd been led to believe. I took the low path, which apparently is a lot more harder with rocks. It's October, there's not a lot of people on the trail at all. It's very quiet. I thought if I really hurt myself, I'm not gonna have anybody find me. And there was situations on the loch where I was really concerned. What the actual hell? I thought the worst of the rocks and scrambling was behind me, but I've somehow got to get down there with my very, very bad feet and a 12 kg bag on my back. I am so worried about that. I'm just going to take a break, get my breath back, and take that super easy. Oh God, I'm not looking forward to this. I don't want to do that ever again. I kind of just spidered down on my bum. That is so steep and so rickety. There's some really tiny rocks that you have to balance on. It was awful, but I've done it. All right. Loch Lomond was very slow going. It's slow going in general, apparently, from what the accounts that I've read and seen. But when you're injured, like I was, it was even slower. Oh man, today just keeps getting harder and harder. This climb up this hill, Jesus Christ, that pack is killing me. I've still got a little bit more to go, but Jesus, awful. Although I got injured, and although the going was very tough for me, my happiness at being out and doing something like this always outweighed the bad. Always. I felt closer to a part of myself that I hadn't explored in a long time. The part of yourself that wants adventure but also wants to discover what we're capable of and allows ourselves the opportunity to do stuff like that. 12 miles until the next village where I can get some anti-inflammatories and all the other. My first aid kit is depleted, so I really need some stuff. But you can't complain about the view. You really can't. It's beautiful. I think proving something to ourselves is such an important thing. I know it sounds weird, but you can start to trust yourself. I trusted that I had everything I needed to get me through. I had everything I needed on my back. I had my feet to carry me. Yeah, they were letting me down, but it was just a time that I was just so happy. And on day 5, when I arrived at Bainglass campsite, which was meant to be my night 3 campsite, I arrived at about 2 in the afternoon, and I was still in denial at that point. I still really wanted to try to finish, but I knew I wouldn't be able to. I'd really booked my train tickets. I already had a work lined up for the Monday, and I couldn't stay. If I wasn't going to finish, I had to kind of go home. I was hobbling even when I wasn't carrying my pack. I was really, really struggling to walk. And I was so upset. I was sad. That was the saddest I'd been because I knew it was over. If I knew I wasn't going to do permanent damage to my feet, I probably would have tried to hobble. And if I knew I didn't have to kind of get back home, I would love to have just continued, even if I had to take my boots off and try to do it barefoot, which I do not recommend on that trail. But I was trying to find every excuse not to have to go home. But reality set in. I was like, I'm gonna have to call it. So I stayed at Banglass campsite, which was an awesome little campsite. I had some lunch. I went chilled in my tent. Later I went into the pub and I had a nice hot cooked meal. I had a pint of Guinness, but I was just sad because there was everybody around me in the pub all chatting about, you know, they walked so far, what they'd seen, what they experienced, what was to come. And I just didn't want to speak to anybody because I just thought I might cry at this point, or I might I just don't want to verbalize that I have to leave, that I've injured myself and I have to leave. It was an amazing experience, and something about the Highlands was unlike anything, anywhere I've ever been. And as soon as I got on the train the next day to go home, I just wanted to go straight back. So I'd encourage you, I mean, if there's something you really want to do it. Whether it's doing a triathlon or climbing a mountain, whatever it is, do it. You might surprise yourself. And even if you fail, you'd have gained something valuable along the way. Life experience, you'd learn something from it. It would, I don't know, it's, don't discount things. Don't live vicariously like me through other people, seeing other people go on these awesome adventures and be like, oh, I'd love to do that, but never quite doing it. Do it. That's all I can say. That's my takeaway from this video, if you will. So, change of tone. I've been talking about my toes. I don't want to show you my toes, but I want to show you what can happen when you wear boots that aren't a great fit for your feet. If you're squeamish and you don't like toes, who does? Look away now. And final warning, here's some toes. Not a pretty sight, but look after your feet. That's the main thing. So in April this year, a couple of months ago, I attempted to finish up the walk. And you already know that we failed. And I'll tell you all about it in the next video. I hope you've enjoyed that. I know it's probably a long video and something different, but I kind of want to take you guys with me on my third attempt at the West Highland Way, and I wanted to give you some background of my failures, my history of trying and failing the West Highland Way. And it's a cautionary tale, but it's also a promotion because you should walk this trail. All right, until next time.